Thanks, Walter. Well, thank you so much for re-electing me. I promise you I'll do my very, very best. I'll do the best I can do. But I want you to know something, too. I want you to know that not all leaders lead from the front. It's not necessary to do that. So before I really start giving a talk, I really want to share some information. I want to come clean and do a confession for you. I get a lot of help in what I do. An awful lot of help. Beyond the obvious help that I get, which is the staff, and specifically people like L'Oreal and Rebecca and Sandra Ray. In addition, I get help from Steve Burton, who helps me over and above what he needs to do with things like immigration problems and taxes and stuff, American taxes that is, and things like that. I get additional help on top of that. I have people in certain committees that support me in an unbelievable way. I have people like Dr. Edward Vahoon, Dr. Jim Lockhart, Dr. Kathy Hearn, Dr. Petra Weldis, that actually I can send things to them. What they'll do is review it and many times write it and send it back to me so that I can ship it out and I can give it to other people. So I can share it with you. There's a lot of different people and a lot of different support networks that exist for people like me and people like you when you open yourself to receive it. And the help that I get from these people is absolutely astronomical. Because it's not only in written word, it's also in support, and it's a beautiful thing. I travel a lot with Dr. David Alexander, who introduces me to people in other religions and supports me. And when he supports me, he always honors the office and always treats me like gold and acts as my adjunct when I go out and hang out with the Pentecostals and the Baptists, which is really nice. Make sure my robe is on straight so that I look good. I get a lot of help and assistance from home. I have a beautiful wife and family, and my wife, Dr. Deborah, she supports me in what I do. She's there every night when I phone her. Well, now wait a second. Crystal might have taught her something, how she doesn't have to be there every night when I call her. I never thought of that. She puts up with me when I'm cranky. She puts up with me when I'm negative. She guides me. She counsels me. She supports me, usually the counseling part, and aids me when I'm depressed, when I'm upset, when I'm angry. It's an incredible family that we have. Incredible amount of resources that we have that are available for us if we only step up and ask for them and put ourselves out there. I want to tell you a story in way and in lieu of letting you know where we are in the world today. And the story is this. About 16, 17 years ago, I took my 16-year-old daughter on a kayak trip through an area called the Broken Group, which is about 15 kilometers off the west coast of Vancouver Island. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. We started off going north, and there's over 100 islands that you can kayak through. And I'm talking about sea kayaks here. I'm not talking about those funny little things that you let water in and you get wet in. I'm talking about full skirts and rudders and the whole works. And we went with my brother-in-law and my sister and my niece. And so we had 2 double kayaks, and we had 1 single. And my sister was in the single. My brother-in-law and my niece were in the double kayak, and Kelsey and I, my daughter, were in our own double kayak. And we took off and we went north, and we went for 14 days. So we had to pack 14 days of provisions inside these relatively small kayaks. And so we would load them all up and pack them all up, and we would take off. And we would usually kayak for, 4 to 6 hours a day between islands and hit the islands as we went through them in the most magnificent place in the world. It's absolutely spectacular. There's places there where the islands are so close together, they're no wider than this room. and there's water that runs through them. And I can remember kayaking through, and a lot of the islands are old growth forests. It's a national park, so nothing's been cut, and they're just magnificent. And a lot of the islands are sacred, and you're not allowed to put foot on them. And it's because the First Nations there, what they would do is instead of burying their dead, they would hang them in cedar boxes from the trees. So I can remember going through this pristine water, clear as clear can be, right through these channels, and you're looking at the side, and you're allowed to go along the shore, and looking up into the trees and seeing crates of wooden cedar boxes that are maybe 100, 150 years old, hanging by ropes or vines from the trees themselves, in disrepair. I can remember coming around corners and seeing in some of these islands the totems sitting there. You know, old, fallen over in a lot of cases. Just a gorgeous, sacred place. Just beautiful. One night, Kelsey and I, we traveled together, and we made sure that every day we set a purpose. So we would set a purpose for the day. It would be peace, or it would be joy, or it would be harmony, or it would be love. And then what we did all day long is witness it as it was attracted back to us. I took my crab trap and my fishing rod, and we fished along the way. And at night, after we put the tent up and everything, I'd go out and set the trap and catch crab and bring them in. It was magnificent. It was the only time in my life I didn't want to catch a big fish, though, because you're like at heart level, you know. And you've got a rod, and it's the only time I'd ever get a strike on my line and say, "Oh God, please let it be a small one," because I didn't know how I'd get a 20-pounder in the boat without turning upside down. One night, Kelsey and I were on this island, and once again, it was another island very, very close, and there was a current that went through it. And 3 o'clock in the morning, we're sound asleep, and I hear this. And I get up, and I go out, and I went and got Kelsey and took her out. We went down to the shore and sat on a rock with the moon there and watched the seals as they slapped the water and herded the salmon through the channel where the other seals were waiting to feed and catch them. They helped each other. They supported each other in how they did it. It was one of the most magnificent trips I've ever done in my life. And it was spectacular. I had a great experience of bonding with my daughter, and I loved my sister and my brother-in-law and my niece a great deal. And so we got to spend time with them, so it was just marvelous. And for many years, that's what I would do, is travel around with Kelsey and take my holidays with her. My son would go and eat Kentucky Fried Chicken with Deb. They wouldn't go. So my little tomboy came with me. So we just had marvelous, marvelous time. And there was some rough parts to it, too. I can remember we went across the Coaster Channel. And the Coaster Channel was this huge channel that we would travel across, that we had to travel across to get to islands. And it really was a separating point coming down from the north to the south, open to the Pacific on one side, rocks at the very end with sea lions that we got to see at another time. So, I mean, it was a spectacular trip. But when you took off from the island, headed through the channel, through the Coaster Channel, the issue was you couldn't see the other island. It was out of sight. It was way off. And I can remember looking at it and wondering about it and being a little concerned because, you know, if you missed that island, your next stop, if you're lucky, would be Hawaii, maybe Tahiti, and eventually possibly Australia, and for sure Antarctica. So that's a long ways from British Columbia, Canada. But I remember as we took off from it that we always traveled with us, because of the weather that would happen there, two things. The first thing we had a chart, a marine chart, which you would tie down right in front of the bulkhead of where I was paddling. So I knew where I was according to the chart. The other thing that we had was you never got into the boat without putting a lanyard with a compass around your neck. so that you had some idea, if you needed to, of how to find where you're going. And most of the islands, when the weather's nice and it's beautiful, it's simple because you can tour along the side of the island, look at the chart, know exactly where you are, do a quick jump over to another one that you could see in the distance, and you could travel that way. But the coaster channel wasn't that way at all because you couldn't see anything, and all you had was thousands and thousands and thousands of miles of open Pacific if you missed the island you're headed for. So, I remember Kelsey and I, and Donald and Colleen, my sister, Donald, my brother-in-law, and my niece Caitlin, we got into our boats, the three of them, and what we did was we kicked off, and Donald and I, before we left, made sure that we measured a certain amount what the current was going to look like through the coaster channel, so that what we could do is we could establish where we wanted to land on the island and how we were going to get there, how long it would take us, and the amount of drift that we would have on our way there, so that we could set a heading on our compass and head straight for what it was that we wanted and not have to worry about losing where it was we wanted to land. And we got out there in the coaster channel, and the water looked calm. It looked perfectly beautiful. And I can remember we were paddling up there, and one point I was looking over and I was talking to Donald and Caitlin, and Colleen in the single was usually a little bit behind us. And we were traveling along, and I could look over and talk to them, and they were maybe from me to the screen away from me. And so we would paddle in, and we could wave to each other and carry on and converse. And then one time I looked over and I couldn't see them, and I couldn't figure out where they would have gone. And then I looked down, and about 4 stories down, they were canoe or kayaking along there because the swells were that large. Or you'd be kayaking along and you'd look and you couldn't see them, and it looks flat, and then suddenly you'd look up and they'd be 4 stories up there because you were down in the trough. It was a spectacular thing to do, a little scary. And as we kayaked and as we moved along in the kayaks, we were making pretty good time, but it was like a 6-7 hour paddle. And there comes a time and a point when you lose sight of what's behind you. And you still can't see what's in front of you. And so you're in the wide open ocean. And you're kayaking along and you're checking your compass and checking the chart and paddling all the time because you have to keep your momentum. I don't know if any of you know much about kayaks, but especially doubles, they have a tendency, if you stop moving, to dog down, and then it takes 5 minutes to get them back up moving, especially when they're fully loaded with 14 days worth of gear. So we'd be moving along and we had to keep a pace pretty good. And Kelsey, bless her heart, she would say, "Oh, Dad, I'm a little tired. It's time I had something to eat." And I would say, "Well, you go ahead, honey." And then I would just kayak harder to keep us moving. And so she would take a break for 5 or 10 minutes. And then without being asked, she would pick up the paddle again and she'd start paddling. And so we could hit into synchronicity again. Because the key with double kayaking is you have to match it all the time. So you're moving it. And you're moving it, and you're moving it. And when there's 2 of you doing it, or when you have your momentum going, it is really easy. It feels just like this. A little bit more isometric strength, but that's it. Otherwise, it feels like that. One stops paddling, and all of a sudden you're heavily stroking to keep the boat going. And you can't stop because what will happen is the current and the wind will turn you sideways, and then you have to recapture where you were, and it takes time, and you get caught by the current, and you get moved, and you lose your landing spot. You lose where you're headed to. So we were there, and we got to the place where you couldn't see land behind us and you couldn't see land in front of us, and we were still kayaking because we knew that we had this stuff in front of us, and we knew we were on course. We knew that the compass was accurate, and we knew the chart was accurate, and so we felt fairly comfortable with what we were doing and how we were doing it. And so we just kept moving forward. And then the fog came in. Heavy, heavy, heavy Pacific Northwest fog. So heavy that I could hardly see my daughter's back of her head in the front of the boat. No longer had to worry about looking down 4 stories or up 4 stories because you couldn't see any of that. All you could do was just keep paddling. And when I'd take a break, Kelsey would have to paddle harder. And I had to take quite a few breaks because I had to check the compass and then check the chart. And that meant leaning over and looking at the chart and bringing the compass up to my face because it was total whiteout. And we could hear my brother-in-law and my niece, and we could hear my sister as we kayaked through that. It's not unlike what we do here. You know what our job is, don't you? Our job is to move consciousness. It is to transport ourselves from the consciousness we're at today to a new consciousness. And it's important that what we do, and we know what we do, is that we not only do it for ourselves, but we do it for our families, we do it for our communities, we do it for each other, and we do it for the world. That's what we do. And we know where we're going because we have a compass, which is our belief in a higher power, and we have a chart, which is our principles. It's what we believe to be true, the tenets that we hold. And if we follow, when we're paddling, the chart and the compass, you can't go wrong. You will find where you're headed. And we find ourselves in situations sometimes where the fog comes in. And we can't really find where we're going, but we can have faith in what we believe to be true and follow the principles of the teaching and the tenets of the teaching. And we know if we do that, we'll arrive where we head out to do. But you know, to do that kayak trip and to do it without a compass would be insane. You could have principles, but without the compass, it wouldn't take you anywhere. To do it without the chart, with just the compass, is the same thing. I think I'll go north. I think I'll go south. Hawaii, Tahiti, Australia, Antarctica. This is what this teaching is about, is moving the consciousness, growing the consciousness, evolving the consciousness from point A to point B. We know that we do it individually within our own selves, that is the first place we have to start, and that as we do that, what happens is the collective consciousness kicks in and picks up and starts moving in the same direction. And we teach people how to do this, how to use a compass and the chart for the purpose of being able to arrive at a new consciousness. And there's always a time when we are on that and in that boat and we're moving forward to get to the next island. We're in motion. We are not standing still or static. We need to have the compass and we need to have the chart. We need to have the faith and we need to have the principles to get from point A to point B. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is what we teach. This is our purpose in life. The purpose of all life is the complete emancipation from discord of all kinds, and it's sure to be achieved by all. A world that works. And that's the process that we're involved with and how we do it. And so when we find ourselves in the fog, what we need to do is help each other. Because, you know, when we move through this world, there are some people out there who have neither chart nor compass. There are other people out there who only have a compass. You probably know some of them. There are other people out there who only have a chart. They only have their principles. But without the compass, it works the same way. So there we are in the middle of the coaster channel, moving along. And bless my poor sister, she became disparaged. She became disparaged. She became upset. She was all by herself in the fog in a single. We were at least doubles and we could kind of chat with each other and we knew what was going on. And even though the single could go faster than the doubles, it still didn't help her. She felt lonely and she felt lost in the fog. And she had a compass and a chart, but she still felt lonely and lost. So we had to stop in the middle of the coaster channel and take a long rope and tie her boat to the back of my brother-in-law's boat. And started paddling again into the fog. Kelsey and I, we could have just gone ahead. We could have just scooted ahead and kept the pace up and met what we needed to do. That's something that was an option for us. Nobody was holding us. But we fell in behind so that we could ensure that we all got there. And after a couple more hours paddling, the fog began to lift, and you could see the island. And so as we paddled to the island, the closer you got, the easier it was to see the bay that we were headed for, because a lot of the islands are just rocky cliffs and without beaches, so you had to land in specific places. And so we headed for the beach, and we took our boats up onto the beach, and we set up our camp, and we stayed there for a couple of days and relaxed. It was beautiful. You know, we played with the seals, and we'd paddle around short paddles and set the crab trap, and we'd fish, and we'd have a good time. But then one morning, we got up, we packed up our boat, we put it back in the water again, and we headed for the next island. If you visualize the islands as states of consciousness, and you visualize the compass as our faith, and the chart as our principles, you get an idea how we do this. We haven't been on an island for a while. We've kind of been mid-sea for quite a while now. We've been paddling along together for a long time. And sometimes what we've had to do is we've had to tie our boat onto another person's boat. And sometimes what we've had to do is have our boats tied onto another person's boat. We're here to support each other in growing and moving to a new stage of consciousness. It's not just us. The world is in a change of consciousness. We're just paddling and we know where we're going. And historically, what has happened, if you look at the history of society, at least in my lifetime, we're leading in consciousness. Not just centers for spiritual living, but the conscious majority. Those of us who are aware, those of us who have a compass and who have a chart. But even with the compass and chart, we can become disparaged. And we have to tie on and move forward. So the fog is lifted. And we're moving forward. We're headed to a vision and to an idea that's in front of us. And the vision is a vision that works for all, and it comes from the awakening of ourselves and humanity. But you know what? The next island we hit isn't going to be it, probably. And what we're going to do is set up camp. We're going to play around for a little bit and have a good time. And then we're going to pack up the boat and we're going to head on again. And we're going to do it again and again and again and again until we achieve what it is that we set our mind to achieve. It was the greatest trip of my life. Now, all that said, and knowing all that and understanding how that's going to take place, the most incredible thing that I can remember about it is my feeling and my sense in the middle of a foggy ocean of watching my daughter take breaks and sit back and eat and relax and do what she needed to do to take care of herself. But then she picked up the paddle without having been told, and she started paddling again. This is who we are. This is what's happening. We're in the midst of it. Our organization left an island. Walter mentioned the 2012 speech where I said I stepped onto the ice and felt slippery and felt frightened, so I stepped back onto the sand again. We're past the point of no return. We're headed. Society's going to take it there anyway. As long as we're leading, we might as well lead and know where we're going. And the key is to remember our principles and remember our God, remember our faith, remember our belief. If we do that, we're going to arrive where we're headed. But boy, if we give that up, We're just going to be another cork bobbing in a large ocean. We do this together. That's the key and the secret to this. Spiritual leader does not lead from the front. I can't lead from the front. I won't lead from the front. I lead with the help and the support of everybody here. We come together. We have a collective consciousness, not one consciousness pulling the rest of us. So I thank you for electing me. I thank you for re-electing me. I thank you for letting me run unopposed. Still want to know who those 27 people who abstained are. But I thank you for that. And here's what I have to say. I love you. I bless you. I honor you. I'm grateful for you. Follow me. I'll be right behind you. Thank you so much.